Chapter 10. The beans and rice Aunt Consuelo cooked that evening were tasty, but eating was no pleasure for Lupita. No one at the table spoke, and Uncle Emilio paid attention only to a little radio he had brought with him. He kept it tuned to an English-speaking station. El Vino explained over the noise of the radio, Papa listens to all of the gringo sports. When he went to school, he played on the baseball team. Suddenly, El Vino asked Salvador, "Are you going to the fields tomorrow with Mama?" "Sí," Salvador said glumly. Catarina spoke up. "Sometimes on Saturdays, El Vino goes along." "How long did you go to school in Mexico?" "We go for 12 years. She made a sour face. 12 years? Lupita stared at her yellow plastic plate. Her cousins were lucky to be able to get so much education. Ay de me. Even if Papa had lived, no one in her family would have enjoyed so much school. "Don't you know any English at all?" Catarina inquired. "No," Salvador said. "The other maid where I work said she would teach me what she knew," Lupita added, "but she never found the time." "Oh," was all Catarina said. Suddenly, Salvador asked, "Aunt Consuelo, when do we go to the fields?" "Before the sun comes up. Felicio comes to get me in his truck at 5 o'clock in the morning." "Who is Felicio?" Aunt Consuelo jerked her thumb at her husband, who was hunched over the radio. "Emilio's brother. He is a good worker, that old Felicio. He has a telephone in his house, and the gringos who own the fields call him when they need people. Felicio came to tell me last night that there is squash in the valley this week." She ticked off her fingers. "After that comes asparagus and cabbage and broccoli, and then the lemons and onions and radishes. Then the grapefruit and the oranges, sweet corn and grapes. Federico knows all the growers. He keeps me working almost all year long." "Will this Senor Federico want us to pay him to find work? We had to pay a man in Colton." Salvador's tone was sharp. "Not Federico," Aunt Consuelo answered. Salvador's expression became less sour. "What are workers paid in the fields?" $2 an hour for you kids." Lupita sucked in her breath in dismay. She had been made more as a chambermaid. Salvador glowered. "That is less than Lupita and I were paid in Colton." Aunt Consuelo shrugged. "That is what the growers pay the young ones who harvest for them." "Sí," El Vino agreed. "That is what I am paid on Saturdays." When Salvador lapsed into a glum silence, Lupita asked Aunt Consuelo, "Would you teach me some English words as we work in the fields?" Aunt Consuelo, El Vino, and Catarina began to laugh. Uncle Emilio switched off his radio and asked El Vino something in English. Then he laughed too. Finally, El Vino explained, "Mama knows almost no English. We always have to speak Spanish to her." "How can that be?" Lupita asked in wonder. "Our mother told us Aunt Consuelo came here 20 years ago." "See, I came over and got a job as a maid. All I ever learned from the gringa I worked for were words like vacuum cleaner, broom, and mop, washing machine, and clothesline, things like that. She wanted me not to go to night school because she was afraid La Migra would catch me there. I worked for her for 6 years. Then I met Emilio at a dance and we got married. We always spoke Spanish to one another, and I did not go to work again. A few years ago, I began to work in the field where no one speaks anything but Spanish. I have no need of English. Neither will either of one of you." Lupita glanced at Salvador, wondering what he thought of Aunt Consuelo's story, but he was looking out the window at the darkening sky. "Don't you go to the market?" "Sí, Lupita, but one of the children goes with me," Consuelo laughed. "Even if I do go alone, there is always someone there who speaks Spanish. It is not hard to live here without knowing English. Our doctor is a pocho. The people of La Ayuda speak Spanish too." Suddenly, Salvador turned his head. "Once Lupita wanted to become a profesora. That is why she talks of learning English when she has no need of it. Lupita likes to study. She likes books." While El Vino and Catarina and Aunt Consuelo chuckled, Lupita gave her brother an angry look. He didn't need to make fun of her, even if he was unhappy. All at once, Lupita became aware of Irelia Ruiz, the second oldest girl. She stood at Lupita's elbow and plucked at her sleeve. Softly, so no one else could hear her, Irelia said, "I like my profesora." Lupita stared at the unsmiling girl who looked about 8 years old. Her large dark eyes gave Lupita no hint of friendliness. Suddenly, she spun around and darted out through the open door into the twilight to join her younger brothers and sisters. That night, Lupita slept with Catarina and Salvador shared the bed in the living room with small Juan. When it was still dark, Lupita was awakened by a bright light. Aunt Consuelo, holding a flashlight, whispered, "Come on, your brother is up. Do not step on Esmeralda and Pascual when we come into the living room. We will eat when we get to the fields." On Aunt Consuelo's orders, Lupita had slept fully dressed. Now she put on her shoes and stumbled through the house into the darkness outside. Salvador waited there. Following the beam of Consuelo's flashlight, they walked to the roadside to wait beside the Ruiz mailbox. Lupita shivered and pulled the collar of Salvador's jacket around her ears. After a while, she heard the sound of an automobile in the distance, and soon she could see one headlight. Her aunt, who wore a man's straw hat, shone the flashlight on the road, and an old, battered brown truck drew up to the mailbox and stopped. A deep voice called from the driver's seat, "Hola, Consuelo. What have you got there with you?" "Two of my sister's kids from Mexico, or maybe they are Emilio's relations from Texas." The man laughed. "Okay, tell them to get in the back of the truck with the others." Aunt Consuelo held the flashlight so they could see to crawl into the rear of the truck. 5 people sat there, all shabbily dressed and wearing straw hats, 2 middle-aged men and 3 middle-aged women. They looked at Salvador and Lupita curiously, but no one said anything. Chilled by the early morning air and afraid of the day ahead, Lupita started to touch the cross at her throat. She had forgotten it was gone. As soon as she got more money, she would have to buy another. A new cross would never be as precious as Papa's, but it would be better than none at all. Before long, the truck left the highway, turned onto a dirt road, and then onto another before it bounced to a stop beside a wooden building set in the middle of a flat fields. While there was still not enough light to see the crops, Lupita could make out the silhouettes of other trucks and people standing about. Aunt Consuelo got out, banged the truck door shut, and cried, "Lupita, Salvador, come with me. I'll take you to the boss." The boss was a big red-haired gringo who sat at the table inside the shack. The overhead lights were so bright that they made Lupita's eyes ache. The gringo gestured toward the Torres children and asked in harsh, queer-sounding Spanish, "What have you got here, Consuelo?" "My husband's nieces and nephews from Texas," she told him. "They have cards, but they forgot to bring them along. You know how kids are." While Lupita froze to her spot on the floor, the gringo looked at her and Salvador up and down. He grunted. "They forgot, huh? I've heard that before. But I suppose they can harvest squash." "What's your name?" he asked Salvador, reaching for a piece of paper. "Joe Ruiz," replied Aunt Consuelo quickly. "This is his sister Maria." "Ruiz and Ruiz, eh?" The gringo wrote down the names and said, "All right, that's all for now." "Sí, boss, gracias. They'll be very good workers. You'll see." Aunt Consuelo herded Lupita and Salvador outside where another man was handing out cardboard boxes. "There is food inside the boxes, food for now and later too," she said. "How long do we work here?" Salvador asked. "Until the boss tells us to stop. 1 or 2 o'clock. "What are we to do?" "Go find Fidenicio. He will show you. He's brought many workers here and knows what the gringos want." "What does Senor Fidenicio look like?" Lupita asked. "We have not seen his face." "He has hair the color of milk." Consuelo waved her hand and walked over to talk to some women standing in line for food. By now there was light enough to see the faces of the men who had gathered together beside the shack. The white-haired man must be Senor Fidenicio. He was long-faced like his brother Emilio, but there the resemblance ended. Fidenicio was laughing with one of the other men and playfully pretending to jab at him with his fists. Trailed by Lupita, Salvador went up to the group and waited to be noticed. After a minute, Felicio Ruiz looked over. Ah, you are the kid's Consuelo brought. Did you ever box down in Mexico, kid? He asked Salvador. No, Senor Felicio. That's too bad. Boxing, that's one good way for a kid to get ahead. Joining the United States Army or Navy is another. Not for a wetback like me, senor, Salvador said. No, Senor Felicio's face changed, growing thoughtful. Then he smiled again. Long ago, I used to be a boxer in the army. Salvador nodded. Aunt Consuelo said you would show us what we are to do. We have never worked in the fields before. Our father was a fisherman. Federicio led them away from the other men. I see you have your boxes. Bueno, after we eat, follow me into the field. Lupita opened the box of food the gringo had given her. Inside were canned orange juice and some hard brown donuts. They were dry and tasteless. The sandwiches in their wax paper packets were for mid-morning. When she and Salvador had finished eating, Federicio came back from where he had been sitting among the men. Come with me. Lupita watched him pick up a wooden box set along the edge of the field. Salvador grabbed a box too, and so did she. The box was light. The crop was to be harvested. This was summer squash, a small scalloped-edged pale green vegetable that grew close to the ground. Federicio bent over, took hold of a squash, and broke it away from its stem. Then he put it into the box, and lifting the green leaves, began to hunt for squash nearby. When he had filled the box, he carried it to the end of the row and set it down next to a stack of empty boxes. Lupita watched him take the wire handle off the full box and fasten it to one of the empty ones. Carrying it, he returned to the row in which he had been picking. Before he bent over again, he grinned at her. Do what I just did. Be sure to pick all the squash in each row you work. After a while, the boss will bring a truck to pick up the full boxes and take them to the market. Si, senor. Carrying her box, Lupita walked to the end of the 60-foot row Federicio had pointed out. It was 6 rows ahead of him. At first, she found hunting among the leaves and among the ground for the small green squash not difficult. But at the end of the second hour, she began to understand why Uncle Emilio had said they wouldn't forget the fields. Each time she straightened up to carry a full box to the end of a row, her back felt as if someone had hit her with a stick. Kneading it did not ease the pain. Her neck and shoulders ached too, but ay de mi, her hands! Twisting hundreds of squash from their stems was making cramped claws of them, and her fingers were raw with broken blisters. As the bright October sun rose in the sky, the heat became unbearable for Lupita. She perspired more and more heavily. First, she took out Salvador's jacket and tied it around her hips. Then she fished out the baseball cap she had left in the pocket. Lupita quickly realized why the pickers all wore straw hats, because her wool baseball cap was unbearably hot. She felt as though someone had poured scalding water on her head. Sweat ran into her eyes, blinding her. When she wiped it off with her hand, her face became streaked with yellow-brown dirt. Salvador's old shirt clung to her, and as she twisted the vegetables from the stems, she felt her back begin to itch. She didn't know if it itched from the rivets of sweat or from the ants and other insects she spied among the squash. Holy mother! She had thought lifting the mattresses in Senor Efren's hotel was hard work. Lupita glanced behind her and saw her aunt harvesting, never straightening up. Several rows away, old Federicio was doing the same. How fast those two picked! She stood up and focused with difficulty on Salvador. He was standing too at that moment, holding his hand to the small of his back. He looked around and saw her. Even at that distance, Lupita could see his black scowl. He shook his head and bent again to his work. Lupita passed the remainder of the morning in a stupor of weariness. When the boss blew a whistle at 10, she collapsed beside her half-filled box and numbly ate her sandwiches. She could hardly taste the cheese and bread. All she wanted was more cool water from the water cart. She had taken a drink every time it came around, and now she drank deeply again. At 1 o'clock, Lupita felt scarcely able to make her way out of her row. Somehow, she got her envelope of cash and stumbled over to Senor Felicio's truck. She noticed how angry Salvador looked as he got into the truck a minute later, but she was too tired to talk. Sitting down next to her, he hissed, My back hurts. I hate this work. I like the dishwasher better. Lupita forced herself to speak. Salvador, I do not like this work either, but La Amigra did not come here today. That does not mean La Amigra will never come here, he grumbled. Dios, I hate this kind of work. Lupita touched his arm with her raw fingers. Perhaps it will be easier harvesting the other things that grow here. Perhaps picking fruit from trees will be more pleasant. Mañana? Always Lupita mañana, he muttered. Then he added, we must use ladder for trees. We can fall off. He shook his head. All at once, one of the women who had been watching them asked, do you and your sister go to church here in Indio? We came only yesterday, Salvador answered suddenly. You should go, muchacho. Señor Fidenicio has a club for young men there. They have fiestas, good times. Lupita snapped at the sadilla. Salvador, you should go to mass. What about you? He asked, still sullen. I cannot yet. Remember, I left my dress behind in Colton. He sighed. I suppose I can go to church. See, and I will get another dress. But first we will send more money to Mama. Lupita hesitated. I won't write of La Amiga driving us away. I will say that we are happy in Indio and that we have work. Salvador gave her a tight smile. Some more lies will come out of the Ruiz house. Salvador, why should we make Mama more unhappy than she already is? You're right, Lupita. You take care of it. We will send her as much as we can. He spoke with his eyes closed, leaning back against the side of the truck. As Fidenicio went onto another road, Salvador winced, bouncing against the hard metal, and cursed under his breath. Will you write Mama what very fine work Uncle Emilio and Aunt Consuela found for us? He muttered through clenched teeth. No, you know I will not. Lupita averted her eyes from his angry face. She was too exhausted to say any more.